The Harper family had long called the high desert of New Mexico home, living in a place where the horizon stretched endlessly and the rugged mesas carved sharp silhouettes against the sky. Their ranch sat in the midst of a landscape both harsh and breathtaking, vast plains of red dust and resilient scrub brush, under a sun that bore down relentlessly. This isolation, miles away from the nearest town, forged a lifestyle defined by perseverance and self-reliance. It was a life that demanded strength, patience, and a deep connection to the land. For the Harpers, the ranch was more than just a home. It was a testament to generations of hard work and community ties that ran deep through the family's history. At the heart of this family was Samuel Harper, a retired paramedic whose years of service had given him not only a commanding physical presence, but also an unshakable sense of responsibility and justice. His strong frame and steady gaze carried the weight of experience, a man who had faced emergencies and chaos with calm resolve. Beside him stood Evelyn, his wife, whose gentle spirit and unwavering compassion had shaped her career as a social worker. Evelyn's empathy was boundless, a quiet force that held the family together and reached outward to their community. Together, Samuel and Evelyn raised 3 children, each at different stages of childhood and adolescence, ranging from the boundless energy of an 8-year-old to the complex challenges of a 17-year-old nearing adulthood. Adding to this household was Samuel's elderly mother, whose presence lent a layer of warmth and continuity to the bustling family life. Despite the demands of ranch life and the needs of their children and elderly parent, the Harpers had always maintained an open door and an open heart. Their history with foster care was long and rich, marked by a commitment to providing shelter and support for children whose lives had been fractured by instability. Each child who passed through their home carried a story of struggle and hope, and the Harpers viewed these experiences not as burdens but as opportunities to extend their family and offer healing. When the chance to adopt arose, the decision was natural, almost inevitable. They welcomed Jake, a 15-year-old boy whose presence was marked by a quiet intensity. His pale complexion and ash-blonde hair set him apart visually, while his penetrating gray eyes held stories deeper than words. Jake's past was a patchwork of foster homes and fractured attachments, each transition chipping away at his trust and sense of belonging. Behavioral issues shadowed his early years, making connections difficult and leaving a trail of broken bonds in their wake. Jake arrived at the Harper Ranch carrying the invisible weight of his history, pain, confusion, and guardedness wrapped tightly within him. Unlike the energetic laughter and open affection that filled the Harper home, Jake was reserved, his silences loud in contrast. The family believed that their consistent routines, the steady rhythms of ranch work, and the warmth of their daily life could offer Jake the stability and safety he had never experienced. They approached him with patience, determined to break through the walls he had built. Every meal shared, every chore assigned, every moment spent outdoors was an invitation, a gentle call to belong. Yet beneath the surface of these efforts, Jake's inner turmoil simmered. His quiet demeanor masked a tumultuous world of emotions, frustration, mistrust, and a deep-seated alienation born from years of displacement. The Harper family's ranch, though expansive and alive with the pulse of nature and kinship, was unfamiliar terrain for Jake. The close-knit dynamics of the family, their easy laughter, and the sense of rootedness stood in stark contrast to the chaos he had known. His arrival disturbed the balance in subtle ways, casting shadows over an otherwise harmonious home. The ranch's open skies and wild beauty failed to reach the places inside Jake that craved safety and certainty, but instead felt like reminders of isolation. As days turned into weeks, the gap between Jake and the rest of the family seemed to widen, even as the Harpers' commitment to him deepened. In this remote corner of New Mexico, surrounded by the vast silence of desert winds and the steadfast endurance of the land, the Harpers sought to build a new beginning. Their hope was anchored in love and the belief that with time, Jake's guarded heart might open. They imagined a future where he would find peace among the mesas and the family that embraced him. But the fragile threads of trust and belonging required more than just patience. They demanded understanding of the unseen scars Jake carried. The harsh beauty of the desert mirrored the challenges ahead, both relentless and filled with potential for renewal. The Harper family stood ready to meet those challenges, unaware that beneath the wide-open sky, the quiet boy they had taken in was wrestling with storms that would test them all in ways they could never have foreseen. The Harper family devoted themselves wholeheartedly to integrating Jake into the fabric of their daily lives, weaving him into the steady rhythms that defined ranch life. From the earliest days, they sought to ground him in the tangible, purposeful tasks that shaped their existence, feeding the livestock as dawn broke, mending fences that marked their boundaries against the wild, gathering firewood to warm their home through chilly desert nights. These routines, simple yet demanding, were meant to offer Jake more than chores. They were gestures of inclusion, invitations to claim a role and find belonging within the Harper household. The family dinners, held under the worn wooden beams of their dining room, were not mere nourishment but sacred gatherings. Around the table, stories mingled with laughter, and the bonds of kinship were reinforced with every shared smile and exchanged word. Jake's siblings, spirited and welcoming, extended frequent invitations to play games or join adventures that coursed through the land beyond the ranch. They yearned to draw him into their tightly knit circle, hoping that companionship might thaw the barriers he kept firmly in place. Yet, despite these sincere and persistent efforts, Jake remained resolutely distant, an island unto himself amid the currents of family life. His presence was defined by silence, an absence that spoke volumes in a home where voices intertwined freely. His eyes, when they lifted from the ground or drifted from the room, avoided meeting those of his adoptive family. They often seemed fixed on some unreachable horizon or cast downward, as if seeking refuge from the gaze of those who reached out to him. When spoken to directly, his replies were rare and clipped, monosyllabic words or sometimes no response at all, leaving his family grasping for fragments of understanding beneath the surface of his quiet exterior. Their attempts to know him were met with a wall of reticence, frustrating the love that sought to bridge the divide. This withdrawal was never mere shyness. It was the outward manifestation of a deeper, more profound discomfort that gradually hardened into a visible and troubling form. Jake's unease within the warmth and familiarity of the Harper home grew, slow and simmering, into a resentment that remained unseen yet palpable, an invisible barrier erected between him and those around him. The ranch's openness, intended as a nurturing embrace, transformed in Jake's perception into a stark reminder of his separateness from the family's unity. Their laughter, once a hopeful beacon of connection, instead reverberated as a sharp contrast to his solitary existence. Where others found comfort in the collective bonds of kinship, Jake found only reflections of his alienation and loss. The closeness that defined the Harper household underscored everything he lacked: a stable history, unwavering affection, a place where he truly belonged. This profound alienation did not remain abstract. It expressed itself in subtle yet telling ways that threaded through Jake's daily life. Small acts of defiance and avoidance appeared, almost imperceptible but consistent. Invitations to participate in family activities were often ignored or declined. Tasks assigned to him were left unfinished or deliberately neglected, as if rejecting the shared responsibilities that symbolized connection. During family gatherings, Jake would sometimes distance himself physically, positioning his body away from others, retreating to shadows or the far corners of the ranch where he could observe but not engage. His demeanor carried a chill of indifference, a protective emotional armor crafted carefully to shield him from vulnerability and the sting of rejection. These behaviors introduced an undercurrent of tension beneath the outward calm of the household. Moments of sharp, fleeting glances, silences that stretched awkwardly, and subtle withdrawals wove a fabric of unease that puzzled and saddened the Harpers. They could perceive the pain behind Jake's actions, yet found themselves struggling to bridge the growing gulf. Among the family, Evelyn's background as a social worker sharpened her sensitivity to the emotional signals Jake emitted. She was among the first to recognize that his struggles transcended the usual challenges of adolescent adjustment. She observed the slight, involuntary flinches he exhibited when unexpectedly touched, the way his body tensed at raised voices or sudden, sharp movements. His prolonged retreats into isolation, sometimes spending entire days shut away in his room, spoke not simply of a desire for solitude, but hinted at deeper battles with fears and anxieties that he was unable or unwilling to articulate. Even in those rare moments when Jake appeared outwardly calm, Evelyn glimpsed flashes of unprovoked anger. His eyes narrowing, fists clenching, expressions tightening with a harshness that unsettled her profoundly. These signs were markers of psychological wounds, unhealed, traumas buried beneath layers of silence and resistance that no words had yet penetrated. Driven by concern and hope, Evelyn gently introduced the possibility of counseling, envisioning professional support as a vital tool for Jake to navigate the tumultuous emotional landscape within him. Yet, Jake met these suggestions with steadfast refusal, asserting that he did not require help and recoiling at the notion that he might be broken or abnormal. His resistance went beyond simple stubbornness. It was rooted in a deep-seated mistrust of adults, of the institutions meant to assist him, and even of the family that had welcomed him. The prospect of exposing his vulnerabilities was unbearable, threatening the fragile defenses he had meticulously constructed through years of upheaval, disappointment, and fractured attachments. As Jake increasingly retreated inward, the sprawling desert surrounding the Harper Ranch assumed a dual role, a literal and symbolic refuge. Its vast, empty expanse mirrored his internal isolation, open and expansive yet stark, desolate and unyielding. Jake would spend long hours wandering the outer reaches of the property, slipping away from the household's busy rhythms into the quiet and stillness of the wild. Removed from the watchful eyes and well-meaning voices of his family, he found a precarious sense of control amid the indifferent vastness of the landscape. The desert offered no expectations, no demands for connection or understanding. Yet even this refuge was tinged with loneliness, a harsh reminder that despite the physical freedom, Jake remained severed from the community and love he desperately needed but could not embrace. The Harper family's earnest and sustained efforts to integrate Jake into their lives met with mounting frustration and heartbreak. Their hopes that consistent love, steady routine, and patient acceptance would heal his wounds clashed painfully with the reality of his profound alienation. Each unreturned glance and every avoided interaction chipped away at their optimism and resolve. They recognized the complexity of Jake's pain and the depth of his struggle, but finding a path forward seemed increasingly elusive. The growing distance between Jake and the family threatened not only his own well-being but also the harmony and cohesion of the entire household. Evelyn's acute insights into his distress heightened the urgency to find solutions. Yet without Jake's willingness to engage, the family faced an uncertain and painful journey. The ranch, once a vibrant symbol of resilience and connection, now stood silent as a witness to a boy wrestling with invisible battles, his internal struggle casting long, dark shadows over the future of the family that had opened their doors and hearts to him. Jake's sense of isolation deepened with each passing day, feeding a bitterness that grew quietly but relentlessly beneath the surface of his silence. In search of something he could grasp, a place where his feelings might be understood, or at least mirrored, he found himself increasingly drawn to the vast and often shadowy world of the internet. Behind the flickering glow of his laptop screen, far removed from the dusty expanses and tangible realities of the Harper Ranch, Jake entered a different realm, one built on words, images, and shared grievances. This virtual landscape was populated by strangers whose voices echoed his own anger and rejection, creating spaces where pain was not dismissed or ignored, but validated, amplified, and given shape. These digital enclaves were hidden from the eyes of his family, the community, and the world he physically inhabited. Within them, Jake was not the withdrawn boy who rarely spoke or engaged. He became part of a collective narrative woven from stories of betrayal, neglect, and embitterment. The forums and chat groups he frequented were saturated with distorted perspectives where tales of victimhood intertwined with calls for resistance. Here, resentment was transformed into ideology, and adoptive families like the Harpers were cast as superficial oppressors who offered false kindness and stifled genuine identity. The rhetoric Jake encountered was sharp and alienating, painting those who extended care as manipulative, intrusive, or disingenuous. Rather than addressing the trauma underlying his feelings, these virtual communities reframed his pain as righteous indignation, a justified battle to reclaim autonomy and dignity from those who imposed a love he never asked for. Amid the cacophony of voices, a singular figure emerged. A shadowy, enigmatic presence known only by the pseudonym Shadow. Operating from the periphery of these digital spaces, Shadow's influence over Jake grew steadily but stealthily. The mentor's communications were crafted with subtlety and precision, coaxing Jake's vague dissatisfaction into a focused and consuming fury. Unlike the gentle, hopeful, and sometimes fumbling attempts of the Harper family to reach him, Shadow provided clarity and purpose. The messages framed Jake's anger not as confusion or weakness, but as a source of power and control, encouraging him to embrace his fury and to sever the bonds that made him feel confined and trapped. Shadow's words carried a dark validation, offering what the physical world had denied, a voice that acknowledged his pain and urged him toward decisive action. As Jake's interactions with Shadow deepened, so too did his immersion in a twisted ideology that justified hostility toward his adoptive family and the wider community. This digital connection became more than a refuge. It morphed into a battleground where Jake's internal struggles were projected outward and magnified. The community he once yearned to belong to was replaced by one that celebrated his anger as strength, reinforcing the conviction that rebellion was the only path to freedom. The internet became the realm where Jake's alienation flourished unchecked, pushing him further from reconciliation and deeper into isolation. The spaces where care might have bridged divides instead became echo chambers, amplifying his darkest thoughts. Unaware of the profound and corrosive influence these online forces wielded over Jake's mind, the Harper family remained steadfast in their sincere and hopeful efforts to close the growing gap between them. They organized outings into the surrounding desert, believing that shared moments in nature's vastness might soften Jake's defenses and open the channels of communication. Small acts of kindness were woven into daily life. Favorite meals left gently by his door, invitations to participate in simple activities designed to foster connection and belonging. These gestures were given with patience and love, expressions of a family's unwavering commitment to healing. Yet, paradoxically, these efforts seemed only to highlight the widening gulf. For Jake, the warmth and togetherness they extended became stark reminders of his difference, of the estrangement he could neither overcome nor accept. Each overture was met with withdrawal, reinforcing his resolve to reject the family and the world they represented. This growing chasm remained invisible to the Harpers, who lacked awareness of the unseen digital manipulation shaping Jake's thoughts and emotions. Their hope rested on tangible, physical connections, the presence of family, the routine of shared work, the comfort of familiar spaces. They believed, as so many do, that consistent care and love would eventually heal the visible wounds, mend the fractures of the past, and open the way to trust. But Jake's world was increasingly defined by unseen, coded messages and by a mentor whose reach extended beyond their grasp. The family's heartfelt attempts intended to heal inadvertently underscored Jake's growing alienation, as the insistent voice of Shadow drowned out the loving words and actions they offered. Within the walls of the Harper Ranch, a silent battle raged, a struggle between hope and despair, connection and rejection, presence and absence. The desert wind carried away the echoes of a boy slipping further and further from those who sought desperately to save him, leaving behind only the haunting trace of a fractured soul caught between two worlds. Jake's growing bitterness and alienation no longer confined themselves to quiet withdrawal or subtle defiance. They escalated into a dark determination to disrupt and destabilize the Harper household from within. His simmering fury found expression in calculated, deliberate acts designed to sow fear and confusion among his adoptive family, undermining the safety and harmony they had long cherished. The ranch, once a place of steady rhythms and reliable routines, became a landscape of unease, its familiar machinery and spaces tainted by his covert sabotage. In the early days of this descent, Jake's tampering with farm equipment was subtle yet dangerous. Tools and vehicles vital to the day-to-day operations were interfered with in ways that could have led to serious accidents. A water pump essential for livestock hydration was deliberately allowed to run dry, threatening the well-being of the animals and forcing urgent repairs that consumed precious time and resources. Electrical wiring was disturbed, causing unpredictable power outages that unsettled the household's sense of normalcy. Even heavy machinery used for fence repair or land maintenance was rendered unreliable through secret meddling. Loose bolts, misplaced parts, transforming trusted equipment into hazards. These actions were cloaked in silence, leaving no clear culprit and baffling the family as they struggled to maintain order amid unexplained disruptions. Alongside these physical acts of sabotage, Jake's psychological warfare intensified. He left behind cryptic messages for his younger siblings, scrawled notes in unfamiliar handwriting, unsettling phrases that flickered with menace. The notes spoke of mistrust, abandonment, and warnings that no one in the family fully understood. For the children, these enigmatic messages planted seeds of fear and uncertainty. Their once carefree innocence was replaced by whispers of something wrong, something lurking just beyond their understanding. The Harper parents reassured the children as best they could, attributing the notes perhaps to a prank or a neighbor's mischief. But the unease lingered, casting shadows on everyday moments that should have been filled with joy. The family's concerns steadily grew, yet the mystery of the source remained unsolved. Despite increased vigilance and attempts to address the situation openly, no clear explanation emerged. Jake's outward demeanor remained cold and withdrawn, offering no clues and refusing to engage in conversations about the troubling occurrences. His silence, once a source of quiet despair, now felt loaded with menace, a wall behind which dangerous intentions festered. The Harpers found themselves caught between hope and fear, uncertain how far Jake's growing discontent might reach or what it might ultimately lead to. The tension within the household reached a breaking point on a day that began with a tentative attempt at family unity. The Harpers organized a picnic at a secluded canyon overlook several miles from the ranch, a place where the vastness of the desert sky met rugged cliffs and sweeping views. They hoped that time spent together in nature's quiet grandeur would soften Jake's defenses, reminding him of the beauty and bonds he was part of. The children laughed and explored wildflower patches nearby. The elders settled in the shade, and Samuel and Evelyn laid out food on blankets spread across sun-baked rock. Yet beneath the surface, an ominous presence lingered. Jake had spent months meticulously preparing for what he intended to be a final act, a release of all the anger and pain he had accumulated. Unbeknownst to the family, he had secretly gained access to Samuel's locked gun cabinet, a place carefully secured but breached by Jake's cunning. The rifle inside, a hunting weapon Samuel used during desert excursions with his eldest son, had become an instrument of his dark resolve. The weight of the cold steel in Jake's hands was both terrifying and empowering, a physical manifestation of control he had long been denied. As the afternoon sun climbed, Jake moved through the canyon with calculated calm, the rifle concealed but ready. The peacefulness of the desert air was shattered by sudden, jarring gunfire, first a single shot, then another, each one ripping through the tranquility and striking down those who had once sought to nurture and protect him. Samuel and Evelyn fell with stunned disbelief, their faces etched with horror and confusion in their final moments. The children scattered, panic surging through them as they realized the nightmare unfolding. One by one, Jake targeted his siblings and finally his grandmother, methodically extinguishing the lives that had surrounded him with love and hope. The canyon, vast and indifferent, bore silent witness to the carnage. The bloodied blankets and abandoned picnic food lay strewn beneath the harsh sun, grotesque reminders of innocence lost and violence wrought. The echoes of gunfire faded into the desert stillness, leaving behind a scene of devastation that would haunt the community for years. Amid the aftermath, Jake vanished, slipping away into the wilderness that stretched endlessly beyond the canyon's edges. His footprints disappeared into the shifting sands, swallowed by the harsh terrain, as if he had been swallowed whole by the desert itself. The news of the massacre reverberated through the nearby town and surrounding areas, sending shockwaves of grief, disbelief, and fear. The Harpers had been pillars of their community, steadfast, generous, and deeply connected. Their destruction was not only a personal tragedy, but a communal wound, fracturing the sense of safety that rural life often promised. As search parties scoured the wilderness for Jake, they found no trace beyond fleeting impressions in the dust. The boy who had once come seeking belonging had left behind a legacy of horror and unanswered questions. In the days and weeks that followed, the massacre dominated local discourse. The community grappled with the incomprehensible, how a boy who had lived among them, cared for by a devoted family, could turn so violently against them. The desolate canyon remained marked by tragedy, a stark monument to shattered hopes and fractured lives. For those who had known the Harpers, every visit to the ranch, every glance at the wild desert beyond, carried the weight of memory and mourning. The wilderness that had once promised freedom and healing had become the setting of unimaginable loss, a vast expanse reflecting the depths of human despair and the consequences of unhealed pain. The local sheriff's department immediately mobilized a comprehensive search operation following the disappearance of Jake Harper, the young boy who had vanished into the vast, unforgiving desert landscape after the horrific events that shattered the Harper family. The initial shock of the massacre had rippled through the community, but the unanswered question of Jake's whereabouts propelled law enforcement into relentless pursuit. Teams combed the rugged terrain surrounding the ranch and nearby canyons, scouring every crevice, ridge, and trail for signs of the boy's passage. Search dogs were deployed, aerial units scanned from above, and ground teams methodically checked abandoned campsites, water sources, and remote outcrops. Despite these exhaustive efforts, Jake seemed to have evaporated into thin air, leaving behind no discernible tracks or clues to his fate. The harsh desert environment, with its shifting sands and unforgiving heat, offered few comforts and many dangers, making the search both urgent and perilous. As the investigation deepened, detectives turned their focus toward understanding the psychological and emotional factors that had driven Jake toward such violent actions and his subsequent disappearance. Accessing his personal effects, including his computer, phone, and journals, investigators meticulously pieced together the digital footprint of a troubled mind spiraling into darkness. Hours of encrypted messages, forum posts, and private chats painted a disturbing portrait of a boy whose pain and rage had been nurtured and manipulated by unseen forces. The online world Jake inhabited was revealed to be a labyrinth of extremist groups and echo chambers that validated his feelings of rejection and encouraged his descent into violence. Central to these revelations was the enigmatic figure known only as Shadow, a mentor who had played a pivotal role in guiding Jake's thoughts and fueling his anger. Tracing the digital trails, cybercrime experts employed advanced forensic techniques to unmask Shadow's true identity. Their investigations led them to Marcus Reed, a former youth counselor with a long-standing presence in the region. Reed had built a reputation as a dedicated professional who worked with at-risk teens, establishing an online mentorship platform designed to offer guidance and support to vulnerable young people struggling with trauma, neglect, and behavioral issues. On the surface, his work seemed commendable, offering an accessible lifeline to those who might otherwise slip through the cracks of social services. However, deeper scrutiny revealed a far more troubling reality. Marcus Reed's methods, once regarded as unorthodox but effective, had evolved into manipulative tactics that preyed on the insecurities and anger of his mentees. Under the guise of therapeutic guidance, Reed had selectively targeted isolated teens, weaving narratives that amplified their feelings of resentment and alienation rather than alleviating them. His mentorship was less about healing and more about control, exploiting emotional vulnerabilities to shape and direct the youth's thoughts in ways that served his hidden agenda. Several former clients and whistleblowers had quietly reported concerns over the years, citing Reed's intense coercive style and the troubling effects it had on their mental health. Complaints had been dismissed or minimized by institutions that trusted his professional standing, allowing his influence to persist unchecked. The discovery of Marcus Reed's central role in Jake's psychological decline sent shockwaves throughout the community. The betrayal cut deeply, as Reed had been entrusted not only with the care of vulnerable youths, but also with their emotional safety and growth. Parents, educators, and social workers grappled with the unsettling truth that a figure once seen as a protector had instead become a catalyst for destruction. The community's sense of security was fractured, raising urgent questions about oversight, accountability, and the vulnerability of at-risk young people in digital spaces. Law enforcement swiftly moved to apprehend Reed, conducting a carefully coordinated arrest at his modest residence on the outskirts of town. Inside his home, investigators uncovered extensive files detailing the personal histories, psychological profiles, and digital interactions of numerous teens under his care. His office was filled with notes, recordings, and online logs that documented the systematic manipulation and grooming he had conducted. Digital evidence revealed patterns of messaging designed to validate and amplify feelings of anger and disconnection, culminating in explicit encouragements to reject familial bonds and societal norms. The chilling precision of his methods was laid bare, revealing a deliberate and calculated campaign that had fostered destructive behavior rather than healing. During questioning, Reed maintained a veneer of professionalism, claiming his intentions were therapeutic and that he sought only to give voice to the suppressed frustrations of troubled youth. However, his justifications rang hollow in the face of the tangible harm he had caused, particularly in the case of Jake Harper. The authorities charged Marcus Reed with multiple counts, including incitement, manipulation of a minor, and contributing to the tragic outcomes that had unfolded. His trial was anticipated to expose the dark underbelly of exploitative mentorship disguised as care, sparking broader discussions about safeguarding vulnerable populations in an increasingly digital world. The arrest and indictment of Reed marked a pivotal moment for the community, offering a semblance of justice but also highlighting systemic failures. It underscored the necessity of vigilance in monitoring those placed in positions of influence over at-risk youth and the urgent need for transparent accountability in both physical and virtual mentorship environments. As the investigation continued, efforts intensified to support surviving family members, address the trauma left in the massacre's wake, and implement protective measures to prevent similar tragedies. The story of Jake Harper and Marcus Reed became a somber testament to the devastating consequences when trust is weaponized and vulnerability exploited, leaving an indelible scar on a community still striving to heal. The Harper family's ranch, once a place of life, laughter, and hard work, transformed into a somber and chilling monument to tragedy. Its weathered fences and familiar fields stood in stark contrast to the darkness that had engulfed the family and the community they had so deeply touched. The sprawling desert around the property, endless and silent, seemed to absorb the weight of loss and sorrow, holding the echoes of a nightmare that no one could easily forget. The ranch became a symbol of the delicate line between care and harm when it came to troubled youth, how the most sincere intentions can sometimes collide with unseen dangers, leaving devastation in their wake. Within the small town and the surrounding rural areas, the shock of the massacre reverberated deeply. The Harpers had been pillars of the community, respected for their dedication, kindness, and willingness to open their home to those in need. Their destruction was not just a loss of individuals, but a profound rupture in the social fabric. Neighbors, friends, and even distant acquaintances struggled to comprehend the violent act that had shattered a family so emblematic of stability and hope. Mourning took many forms, from quiet personal grief to public memorials, as people sought to process the incomprehensible. The loss was compounded by a pervasive sense of failure. How had the systems designed to protect vulnerable children and families faltered so drastically? The unanswered questions weighed heavily on the collective conscience, fostering a sense of guilt, confusion, and a desperate search for answers. As months passed into years, Jake Harper's fate remained an enigma. Despite exhaustive search efforts, no concrete evidence surfaced to reveal where he had gone or what had become of him after fleeing into the desert. Rumors and unverified sightings occasionally stirred hope or fear among locals. Glimpses of a lone figure moving through remote canyons, a fleeting shadow among the scrub brush, but none led to definitive findings. The harshness of the landscape, with its unpredictable weather, scarce water sources, and dangerous terrain, made survival unlikely. Yet the mystery persisted. Jake's disappearance became part of the haunting legacy of the tragedy, a chilling reminder of a boy lost not only physically, but within the darker recesses of alienation and despair. Every year on the anniversary of the massacre, the community gathered to honor the memory of the Harpers. Vigils were held at the ranch's entrance or within the town's modest church halls, candles flickering in the desert night as voices shared stories and prayers. These ceremonies served not only as remembrances of lives cut short, but also as collective reflections on the unseen struggles that had led to such a catastrophic breaking point. The vigils became moments of solidarity, an acknowledgement of pain, a call for compassion, and a resolve to learn from the tragedy. They reminded those left behind of the fragile humanity at the heart of every family and the urgent need to address the silent battles fought behind closed doors. The case of the Harpers and Jake sparked significant debate and concern beyond the immediate community. Attention turned toward the growing influence of online mentorship programs, digital forums, and the broader mental health interventions intended to support troubled youth. The revelations about the manipulative role played by Marcus Reed, the counselor who exploited Jake's vulnerabilities, highlighted glaring gaps in oversight and regulation. Policymakers, social workers, educators, and mental health professionals joined voices in calling for stricter scrutiny and transparent standards to govern online guidance platforms. The case underscored how digital spaces, while holding promise for connection and support, could also become breeding grounds for manipulation, misinformation, and harm if left unchecked. The tragedy galvanized efforts to develop more comprehensive approaches to identifying at-risk youth and intercepting harmful influences before they could escalate. Training programs for counselors and caregivers emphasized the importance of recognizing signs of digital radicalization and emotional manipulation. Communities invested in creating safer, more accessible mental health resources, combining in-person care with carefully monitored online support. Awareness campaigns sought to educate families about the complex challenges faced by adopted and fostered children, highlighting the critical need for patience, understanding, and vigilance. The Harper's story became a cautionary tale, a poignant example of how vulnerabilities, if ignored or exploited, could lead to irreversible outcomes. Yet, despite these efforts, the vast New Mexico desert remained unchanged, silent, and inscrutable. Its sprawling emptiness seemed to guard its secrets jealously, the shifting sands erasing footprints and memories alike. The land that had once cradled the Harper family now stood as a mute witness to their rise and tragic fall. The harsh beauty of the wilderness contrasted painfully with the broken lives it concealed. Within this quiet expanse, the story of Jake Harper lingered, a haunting testament to the complex interplay of pain, alienation, and manipulation. It served as a sobering reminder of the perilous crossroads where human vulnerability meets predatory influence, and where the consequences of failure can be devastating and lasting. In the end, the Harper family's ranch was more than a location. It was a symbol of hope, compassion, and the promise of new beginnings that had once flourished there. But it also became a symbol of warning, a stark reminder that beneath the surface of even the most loving intentions can lurk unseen dangers. The legacy of the Harpers and Jake compelled communities, professionals, and policymakers alike to confront uncomfortable truths and to strive toward a future where such tragedies could be prevented. Their story remained etched in the collective memory, a profound reflection on the fragile threads that bind people together and the devastating consequences when those threads are severed.